Hello, hello. Welcome to the Misfits Haven. Thank you for visiting. Make yourself at home and grab yourself a drink. We are serving, I should say, whatever is in your fridge. I have water because I'm a basic bitch. Um, also, we have a guest with us today, everybody. Welcome, Rob. Thank you for visiting. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You know,
Also,
my
what's in your fridge?
uh, milk, Diet Coke. Uh, yeah, that's basically it. Bottled water.
Okay, you've got options. All right.
I had some Jack Daniels the other day, but
Oh,
that's
fancy
gone
boy.
now.
Fancy boy up in here. Alrighty. So today's episode is gonna get a little bit maybe crazy. I don't know. There might be some hot takes. I don't know. Okay, so here's the story, right? So I've been dog sitting for a friend and I just got home today. But this morning, as I was waiting for my friends to get home, I found a video. And it was a really good video. And I'm gonna link it in the uh thingy in the description, that's the word. Um and it was about disability representation in fantasy. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a disabled person and I have disabled friends. Let's talk about this."
Agreed.
So, I proposed it to my group of friends and Rob was like, "Yes." So now we're here. um and like so just kind of like as a, I guess, a disclaimer for like me personally, my focus is just on, I guess, blindness, because that's what I know and I don't want to like step on toes or speak for other communities because like that seems like a not good idea. um so like, but I'm sure like a lot of the things we're going to say can apply to other sort of things. um And I know that the video that we're probably going to reference a million times talks about a lot of stuff. So, um, I sent the video to Rob earlier, and I'm sure that you have many, many, many thoughts on it.
Oh yeah, like I really enjoyed the video. It was kind of funny because I was watching other videos, and the video I watched before was extremely serious, and then you put the call out to our D&D group, and which consists of mostly other blind people,
Yeah.
um, um, except for a couple people, but and just like, hey, I'm here. I had nothing else major to do today. I was available, so I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. You sent me the video, and I mean, you said it was going to be a good video, so I wasn't worried that it was going to turn out terrible, but I was surprised at how great it was watching. Yeah, it really made my day.
Um, I enjoyed it a lot. I was not expecting it to be as um awesome as it was, because unfortunately there's a lot of ableism that you tend to run into when talking about stuff like this, and I hate that. And that was not the case with this video, and I was very, very happy about it. Again, in the description, it's an hour long, but it's worth it. And also, they talked about a lot of my favorite characters in like ever, so I was happy about that. So I feel like it's gonna be hard for me to not regurgitate a lot of the info in that video, though. It's kind of a whole thing. I don't have a plan. I did not know where to start. So, um I feel like a lot of time, I don't know where I want to go with this. Help.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a bit of the problem because there's a thousand different ways that one can go about it. I mean, I do think like the basic topic that the video was talking about, disabled. What's the terminology? Like good Oh, it does just apply for disability, but it applies to so many, so many, different categories of, people of minority status. Representation,
Yeah,
good representation
it's a
in any,
positive rep.
we have positive rep. And because I feel like, and there's been several times in my past that I've been told, hey, go come check this out. It's going to be good rep. And sometimes the author or uh, director, or if it's like a movie or TV show or something or whatever, video game, whatever the case may be, sometimes it's claimed to be good rep, and maybe they tried but kind of missed the mark, or people who really didn't know, you could easily tell they did not know what they were doing, or there are some people that just don't care. Like there are a lot of terrible um, examples of representation, especially for disability, be
Yeah,
it physical disability, be it non-physical or non-visual disability, because not all disabilities are physical, let alone visible.
yeah, that's very very true. Um, I think that's a thing that I need to unpack that has just occurred to me, because every time I think of this stuff, I think of the physical stuff, and I'm like, oh shit, wait, that's not. Oh, huh. Well, that's awkward coming out of me.
Well, I mean, I understand that, and sometimes I make that mistake too. But I also understand that, like, as a mostly blind person, um, that's where my thought process goes. Like that's my main. I have other things. Some can be considered a disability. Others not so much. Um, it's kind of a gray area, but like regardless, it's very much like out of everything I personally have, the blindness is the one that it's definitely, it may not always be at the top of the the pole, so to speak, but it's something that I guess what I'm trying to say is, because in a lot of ways, because it's something that we deal with all the time, like in your face, kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot I left that out there, so I ran into it, even though I know the general layout of my house and I can get around, but because I wasn't thinking, whoops, there's a hazard.
You'd be
So I think,
surprised how often I bump into shit and I can still see. Like, I just, I feel that so much.
yeah,
And again, like, I, I guess the reason why I haven't really thought too much about, I guess, other disabled rep is because, like, I'm just like, I don't want to, step on what other communities have to say. So I'm like, I'm going to focus on what I have going on, but, you know, the other, everybody else matters too. So just, I guess, clarifying, I guess.
well,
Um,
and there are as a fanfic writer, as an unpublished writer, something I'm hoping to fix at some point in the future, as as a role player, especially as a dungeon master, setting things up for, like, all the groups that I DM for. There's a lot of times I have to think, okay, how do I best make this work so that we could have good representation of this particular thing, or especially if someone comes and say, hey, I want to play a character who's deaf, I want to play a character who's blind, or whatever the case may be.
I mean, I
But
have a
like,
character who's literally an amputee, so,
yeah,
and she
uh,
possibly has other stuff going on that I wasn't originally intending, but it's there now, and
it happens.
I'm here for it, but like I'm also like I've also found myself, trying to learn a little bit more about just the whole amputee sort of experience just in general, because I'm just like, cuz when I first, like, you know this character, Rob, Rin. When I first made her, like, I didn't, I was just like, okay, just I have this cool concept. It's kind of inspired by Full Metal Alchemist because I don't know, there's just some general badassery there, and I want to do something cool like that. And then it didn't really occur to me that Rin was disabled until like I thought about it. I was like, oh shit, wait, she actually is. Okay, yeah, no, I should probably learn a little bit more about that because like I don't want to be an asshole about things. I want to play a cool character that I like that happens to be disabled, but I want to make it, you know, I don't want to make a mockery of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, no, totally. And that video actually brings up Full Metal Alchemist, which is one of my
Mm-hmm.
personal favorite animes of all time.
Yeah.
But my I have a little sister who is an amputee, and I actually recently watched Full Metal, specifically Brotherhood, but I also want to at some point, sit down and watch the other version, the 2003 version as well, again at some point.
Listen, if you want to
And
do that, hit me up. I will totally watch that with you.
all right, I like Brotherhood a little bit better, but it's 2003 still amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But but the video that you sent me earlier today, like they are correct. Like Full Metal Alchemist is some of, in my opinion, some of the best rep, good positive rep of what it's like to be disabled. Because of all the stuff, like for example, just to give some examples, like you have Edward Elric, who loses his arm and his leg, and he has mechanical prosthetics, and having to connect them hurts. Whether he is reminded when it rains,
Yep.
which is a common thing for a lot of people who are missing a limb, or hell, for anyone who's just suffering from arthritis or other physical ailments. There's also the whole thing, as he grows, he needs to have things recut, adjusted, because it's non-organic, it's not going to grow with him. So like I loved it. I mean, I loved it to begin with, but as well, and I think also the thing is, Minnie, is that when I first watched Full Metal, I was slow. I was like at the beginning of my journey of losing my vision.
Mm.
So like my sophomore year of high school. And so like I kind of understood, and I was trying to like do research and to educate myself, not only with my own future but just in general. But like, especially having watched it a couple of times in years, I have a lot of appreciation, and it's not the only one, but that is a very strong example, I think, on how good rep for a particular type of disability can be done. And yeah, it does. And also someone who, as far as like writing and be it stories or be it crafting D&D world, even if it's a pre-existing world, the world building, like over the past few years I've been designing my own world. I've really gotten into world building. I love checking out something that has amazing world building, even if it's just little details. And yeah, so anyway, I'm done fanboying about Full Metal for the moment.
No, but like I get it though, cuz like there are things that I can relate to from Full Metal, particularly the losing something overnight type of thing. Not the I tried to bring my mom back from the dead and then almost died in the process kind of thing, but just the it's a little bit of a stretch. You're gonna have to bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 6, you probably know this story. I've told this story loads of times actually. But when I was 6, I lost the vision in my left eye literally overnight. It was like, from my perspective, it was like, blink and it's gone. Right? And I was disoriented for a week before I could really register the fact that that is what happened, even though I was seeing that. I had to readjust my entire perception of reality, which is not an easy thing for anybody to do, never mind a 6-year-old. So like in that sense, in the very simplified sense of, I lost a thing overnight that changed the entirety of my existence, and has altered my perception of reality forever. In that sense, I can kind of relate to, I guess, just Ed specifically, like arm and leg kind of deal. Again, not the same thing. It, you know, we're talking about vision versus literally losing limbs, so again, simplified. There's some gymnastics happening. I will admit it. I don't know where I'm going with this at this point. I really don't. It's just that it's just kind of something that I can personally relate to, and I like to. I don't know. I like to, whenever I make characters, like especially for D&D, I like to add something that I can relate to, not specifically a disability, but having that something that you can connect to, I think it's great, and I think that's a big reason why representation is important. So like, it's just it's just nice seeing something that, you can look at that and be like, that's me, maybe,
Well, oh, sorry, please keep going.
Sorry, no, like I'm trying, I don't know if I'm making any sense, because I feel like I'm just going from thing to thing at this point.
Well, you are thing to thing, but you are making sense. So it works either way.
Okay, cool, awesome. Because, like, I'm trying to figure out how to, like, segue this into talking about Toph.
I adore Toph.
Okay.
I adore Avatar the Last Airbender in general, but I definitely adore Toph.
Right, because, like, I love that, like, she's an awesome example of, like, essentially she has a superpower, but, like, it doesn't erase the fact that she's blind. Like, I love that they added, like, those little details where it's like, if she's in an area, even with her seismic sense, if she's in the desert, for example, like, she still has a hard time navigating and figuring shit out, because, like, everything's all shifty, so it's like blurry to her. Or her not being able to that one gag where they're putting up those posters of Appa.
Yeah.
She grabs she's like, I can put up posters, and she like pastes the thing to the wall, and she's like, it's upside down, isn't it? But it's literally turned around, so it's like
I love that.
And like, that shit's just hilarious to me, because it's like, yeah, you're blind when, because like the amount of times I've had moments like that. I love that they treat it with like a bit of humor. Because I'm gonna be honest, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender, but some of the funniest shit in that show to me are the blind jokes.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that mini is a crossroads of several different things. You have the point where good representation of disability makes good world building, as well as good magic building, for lack of better term. I know bending technically isn't really magic, but
honestly, I would say that it counts, but that's a different discussion.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But like, as far as meta concepts go and meta conversations, it's you have good world building, but you also have good, like, it's not so much when you're building skills or powers or magic. It's not just what you can do, but also what can you not do, or what can't you do because it does not work with the rule. Not only the theme of the ability or power or magic that you're working with, but also like the rule. And like I know a lot of times when media and characters and blindness gets brought up, Toph gets compared with Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, a lot. sort of like good versus bad. And I am a fan of both characters, but I also acknowledge the fact that Matt Murdock is in a lot of ways bad representation. Um, but as for Toph, I know which episode you're talking about. I love that because every time I watch that episode, that reminds me of the year that I was diagnosed. I got diagnosed with my eye disorder when I was 16. And due to shenanigans, I got roped into a trip with a group of people. And I got basically put on construction duty, which, word to the wise, do not give a person who just found out that they're losing their sight a chainsaw to work with. It's not a smart move. No one got hurt.
Mm.
But I think about that episode because I remember at one point we were like, yeah, we want you to paint this room. Okay, what was the original color? White. All right, what color do you want us to paint it? An off-white cream. And I remember like, and I told everyone, hey, I'm starting to, everyone knew that I was that I'm starting to lose my sight. I still have, a good amount at that point. I was just at the edge of being like blind at that point. But some things were already starting to leave me. And they just had me paint, and I'd go for it. I ended up painting the windows.
Oh no!
So I just giggle every time I watch that episode because I totally know how Toph feels, and it's like, well, whoops. I mean, hey, at least you have nice cream colored windows. You might not be able to see out of it, but hey, we're in the same boat now.
I love her sort of immediate disappointment. Like, her just like, it's upside down, isn't it? Like, that shit is so real. Another thing I love about her is, I think it was Tales of Ba Sing Se. That whole thing with her and Katara when they go to, like, the spa.
Oh, yes.
And stuff
yes.
like that, and they have this conversation about, like, where Toph is like, I don't really care what people think about, like, my appearance. I don't see that shit. I don't care. But, like, it's nice to, dress up sometimes and feel pretty and things like that. And, like, I remember that when I was a kid, and to an extent, I'm still like this because I despise wearing makeup, and stuff like that. Like, I'm just like, I don't care. When I was a kid, I was like, it's all superficial crap. It's whatever. I don't have that same opinion anymore, but I still don't like wearing it. Just because I don't like how it feels on my face. It just makes me feel uncomfy. But, I guess that's another thing for another time. But,
yeah, but it's kind of relevant, and I feel that, like, because I am a huge fan of makeup, although there are some things I prefer more than others. But
sure.
And as someone who's losing more and more my sight, I only have a little bit left. In some ways more than I realize, but applying that, let alone whatever, it's difficult. So it can get a little frustrating sometimes. So it's finding yourself at that point where on one hand it's like whatever, but on the other hand it's like you may not be able to see it, but it's just having the ability to choose to make yourself a little bit jazzy for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
And,
Be that
like,
for because you wanna or whatever.
so here's the thing with me is, like, I've legitimately had that conversation that Toph has with Katara with so many people, like, basically word for word. Like, I'm like, I'm blind. Why should I give a shit? Why does this even matter? And, like, it's just kind of interesting to think about how, like, somebody with sight sees that, like, sees how people look and maybe even cares about it, or maybe they don't. Who knows? But, like, it's so interesting to me to have that sort of thought even expressed, because it's like I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it doesn't come up super often. And it's just like, I see that and I'm like, I've legitimately had this talk with people, and I've had that talk with other sighted people, and they're like, appearance matters. But also it doesn't. It doesn't matter until it does. I don't.
It's this well on what it it's multiple different things. I think part of it is because essentially whether we like it or not, we live in a sighted world.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, um, but and sometimes it's like as a child you hear the phrase, "Hey, don't judge a book by its cover." Appearance is only skin deep, but at the same time, so many places, so many like first impressions, yada yada yada. So like it's part of culture,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying it's a good thing. Like every culture has its good sides, its bad sides, its awkward sides,
Mhm.
and even amongst the blind, like we definitely have our own culture, in a lot of ways, and it's just trying to find that balance between, okay, I realize that regardless of my ability to properly and accurately participate, that there are going to be times where um, people are going to judge based on it, or or not even judge, but expectation. Expect that. Oh, okay, well, and then there might be judgments if you aren't able to live up to that expectation, which is still terrible. But at the same time, it's definitely about finding who you are. To quote one of my favorite quotes from the entire, or partly for paraphrase from one of my favorite quotes from the entire series from a totally different character. It's time for you to start asking the big questions, like who are you and what do you want? Figuring out who you are as a person, and do you want to jazz yourself up because it makes you feel good, and maybe you like the style. Um, and I don't know. It's a weird place. I don't think there's a perfect answer.
Oh,
Um,
definitely not. Um, I'm just like, that is such a real conversation to have, though, and like,
yeah,
it just, it kind of made me smile when I saw that, because I'm like, I feel this. This is a thing that I've legitimately tried to talk about with people, and I've had people understand and be like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, or people just straight up tell me like, no, you're dumb. Um, which that's a whole different conversation about toxic people. But anyway, I think it's cool that um, there are points in media where that kind of thing is actually like shown, where um you can tell, like, even though Toph in that moment says that she doesn't usually care, the fact that she went through with it, like, she does to a point, she does care, like, deep down she does care how people see her and stuff like that, and I think that's a really relatable thing. um because, like, even
well,
I do too, like, I'm like, I don't like makeup and stuff, but I still care about my appearance. It's just I express it different. That's a whole other, I guess,
yeah.
discussion.
Well. I mean, and that kind of but it does go back to representation. There's so many layers to so using Toph as an example. I mean, she doesn't care about it because she is who she is, and she should be judged and appreciated for who she is.
Mhm.
But at the same time, as a human being, naturally we're to lesser greater extent. Everyone's an individual, so everyone's different. But that we're social creatures, and there's also, you know, looking at Toph example, her background. She comes from a family who was very smothering.
And
You
like,
know,
she was isolated
yeah, it
for
was
most of her life.
and so trying to be herself authentically herself, but also, finding people to fit in, to connect with,
Yeah,
who
like
will accept.
everybody wants to fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, that's just real as
I
hell to me.
I think one of the things why I love Toph is such as an amazing example of good disability reputation. Wow, let me try that again. Representation. I mean, yes, she has amazing reputation for being good representation of blind, but
Yep.
I think part of it is not just the fact that how they show her blindness and the fact that it balances her abilities and that her abilities balance, her like it allows her to be blind and that still be a challenge, but one that she can live with and grow and adapt. um but at the same time, the other part of her, why she's good representation, is that you, in a lot of ways with her, that you don't always get to see with other attempts at specifically representing the blind, as far as characters go, is you get to see some of the struggles that she deals with. And I'm not just talking about, like, her on the sand, but like social struggles, like the insecurities that she has. And they, in a lot of ways, to a lesser or greater extent, mirror a lot of the insecurities and challenges that, real life blind people face.
Mhm.
Um, and so, because the whole point, I mean, fantasy aside, because there's different reasons why we get into fantasy, why we enjoy fantasy. But like when it comes to like different people, different walks of life, like regardless of sexuality or race or ethnic group or culture, whatever, we all want to see someone who is at least vaguely at the basic level of reflection of ourselves, that we have a role model that goes, you know what, yeah, like there's someone out there that, like especially people who may not have had like a normal, well, I don't like using the term normal, but like an average sighted person who maybe has never had an opportunity to get to know someone in their own life who's visually impaired or blind. We have someone out there that is a character. Yes, they're fictional, but they are in a way, a gateway, a good gateway in the case of Toph, of saying, hey, we're just like you. We're people. We have our desires and our fears. We want love. We want to grow and, to find things we're good at and to go on crazy life adventures from time to time. In a positive, healthy way. And I think it's one of the main reasons why it's so disappointing or so upsetting when you're faced with disappointing or terrible representation.
Yeah, no, 100%, because then you're getting uh sometimes you're just getting really awful stereotypes or just straight up harmful shit being spread, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not great. I can't think of any particular character off the top of my head that is that. um Kind of don't want to, if I'm being honest. um I'm sure there are plenty,
Well,
unfortunately.
I mean, I'll bring you an example, and I know that was covered on in the video, and like and that, this Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. I am a fan of Daredevil, though. When I was a sighted person, as I was losing my sight, and as a mostly blind person, I acknowledge at the beginning and the end of the day that uh, he has a very flawed representation of a as a blind character. and
Sure.
and I think that's largely due to the fact, unlike Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they gave her a power that works with her disability and balances her disability. With Daredevil, they essentially give him a power that replaces, like completely replaces, and in some ways, like his sonar sense. Um, is so good that he can perceive things in a lot of ways better than a normal sighted, your average sighted person. But he has weaknesses, just like Toph. And I will say that that's one of the only things I do like about Daredevil. Um, as with Toph, like when she's in the sand, it's harder for her to perceive things. With Daredevil, because a large part of his abilities are based on sound, you can overwhelm him pretty easily with extremely loud sound.
I
I think. Sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, I would have not thought about that because I'm not as familiar with Daredevil, admittedly. So,
I grew
um,
up a comic
but that
nerd, so.
makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense.
But I will say one another. I think another part aspect of the representation conversation is, especially in regards to Daredevil, is animated versus live action. Because when you are, especially if you are not disabled yourself, but you're playing a disabled character and it's a live action setting, you go through training um, to try to put yourself as best you can in that shoes. I have seen some adaptations of Daredevil where it is all over the place, where sometimes you could tell that the actor, let alone the people surrounding the actor, did not bother. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so even though it's a very flawed movie, I'm a huge fan of the 2003 Daredevil movie, and it's like I said, it's a very flawed movie, and like Daredevil's side, like everything around the character's flawed. But then again, that was back during what is commonly known as the dark age of comic book movies. I'm still a huge fan. But one of the things I do enjoy about it, because I grew up as a comic book nerd, and I'm a technical nerd as well. I like to look like books, movies, what have you. I like to look behind the scenes. I will say this: Ben Affleck, who played Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, in the 2003 movie, got training from like an orientation mobility instructor to learn the most basic version of reading Braille, just enough that so that he at least doesn't look like a fool trying to act the character.
There was at least some degree of effort put in, which
Yeah.
is awesome to see. Like, and like in my mind, it doesn't have to be perfect. Um, but like, just to have that genuine care and effort into, representing it like accurately, or I guess properly, with a degree of respect and care, like it doesn't go unappreciated.
Well, I mean, I will say I do appreciate the age that we're finding ourselves in the 2020s, because I cannot remember what movie it was, but I remember like a year or so ago I heard some upcoming movie. I don't know if it was ever made or not. Um, but there's a movie where they were actually wanting to hire like an actress who was visually impaired or blind to play a character who was supposed to be visually impaired or blind in the movie. I hope that happened, and I'm definitely gonna have to look that up some point later, because that's definitely something I think everybody, who is, be they disabled, be they of a particular sexual orientation, so on and so forth, gender expression, what have you, want to be able to not only see good rep in animated media or in literature media or video game media, but also see people from their own community playing characters that's supposed to represent them on TV or on the big screen or in plays for that matter.
Yeah, it's like sometimes sometimes that good rep just comes from the community itself.
Yeah.
And I love that can be a thing now too. Like, instead of having to rely on others for that representation, you can be your own rep, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
It's a valid option, and I think it's a great option. That's kind of, that kind of gets into one of the biggest reasons why I started making content in general, because I'm like, I want to share my experiences as a blind gamer and, just a blind person in general. And, you know, it's like I'm trying to be that rep um, that I've wanted for myself, I guess. And
I to-
I don't
I totally feel that.
know.
No, no, I no, no, I totally feel that because like I mean, granted, I no longer have that channel, but I got into YouTubing the first time. There's been several channels over the years, but the first time in 2008. And back then, there were a couple of blind and visually impaired YouTubers, but a lot of the blind content that was on YouTube at the time were basically sighted friends, sighted family members uploading. But then again, accessibility was not as good as it is now back then.
Hmm.
Uh, either. So that was. I mean, it was okay. Because I was able to navigate it even back then with like NVDA, which is my preferred screen reader.
100%.
Okay enough, but still, like so like when I was, that was not the only reason why I made content back there. There were all kinds of reasons, but that was definitely one where I'm like, hey, I'm a person who's losing my sight, and I belong to certain communities, including that one, and I definitely want to see more content out there, and to have more conversations, to share my perspectives, because in a lot of ways, um, we are our own race. We live it, we breathe it every day, and sometimes that can be annoying. Especially, I
Yeah.
mean, um, but if nothing else, at least you can share your perspective the way you want to share.
Yeah, and I appreciate doing it because like there are times where it'll come up during streams and I'll bring it up all the damn time, like especially when I'm like reading. It's like, "Hey, sorry it's slow. I'm blind. Y'all are going to have to bear with me." And it's like I I feel like a lot of what I do is very indirect because like, when I talk about it, it's usually aside from me like I guess explicitly mentioning it, it's usually not like a deep dive like we're doing now. It's more
Hmm.
just like, yeah, this is a part of my life. Moving on, you know? And I do feel like at least a lot of people that I've run into growing up, this is not a universal statement, just to, I don't know, be extra clear about that.
Yeah.
Um, I've run into a lot of people that um, look at like blindness and see that as like, they'll see the blindness first before the person,
Hmm.
and they don't tend to look past that, and then they just make all kinds of assumptions rather than asking questions. So it's like, I want to show who I am first, and then, you know, it's just the me being blind is a part of that, but it's not the primary thing, you know. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that's really important, especially when we go back to characters like Toph and stuff. Like you see her personality, you figure like her disability is a part of her, but it is not the entirety of who she is. And I think that's awesome. I think that having that like I guess like a three-dimensional character instead of like this character is basically one trait. Like to steer away from disability for a moment. Um,
Hmm.
you know how you have like all those, especially in the 80s, you'd have like shows and like these shows where there's like this ensemble cast and like one guy's the nerd, the other guy's the jock, the other guy's like the charismatic leader, and then you have girl.
Yes, yes.
Where
Actually, one
their
of my
their
favorite.
personality and everything about them is girl. And like,
Yes.
no.
Um.
I hate that so much.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I will say. I do agree. I hate that, but there are some, and there are, unfortunately, there are some modern movies, but thankfully they're not as frequent as they used to be, where they seriously go with those tropes, with you know jock, nerd, what have you. But there's also some really good and really hilarious movies that's been made in the past, I don't know, like 20 years. Like Cabin in the Woods is the one that kind of comes to mind the most, where they're like, I mean, granted, a large part of it's meta conversation, where you
Sure.
go beyond the story itself, and so it's a bit of deconstruction of what's going on. But it's the fact it's like, hey, yeah, like back in those days, the 60s, 70s, especially 70s and 80s, it's like a lot of these genres, a lot of these tropes were just being developed for the very first time, and so a lot of mistakes were made,
Hmm.
a lot. But it's just, hey, let's poke fun at the fact that this is where we were then, and we have developed a lot since then. And I don't know where I was trying to go with that point, but it's just, I don't know. You saying that just made me think about that. And there's been a couple others where I've also seen a couple good movies, not just in horror, but also in like fantasy, where it's like, yes, we need certain people, certain qualities to fulfill a certain quota, but it's a jumping off point. But that's not the entirety of their being. They're not
Yeah.
just a simple one-dimensional character. Um, but that's once again it goes back to not just good rap, but also good writing, good character development, good world building to a certain extent.
100%.
Um, a
Sorry, go
lot of
ahead.
times, no, a lot of times they go hand in hand.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, what I was mentioning earlier, this is not really disability, and I won't really go into too many details, but there's this fandom that I'm a huge fan. Well, fandom I'm a huge fan of. Um, but it's a web series called Worm, and it's a neat take on superhero on the superhero trope, and how one gains powers, and it deals with a lot of like trauma and like a lot of grit. And it's very edgy and dark in some places, but I like it. Besides the genre itself, it's just the fact that there is a lot of like interesting takes on rep, and there's a couple of good disabled rep now that I think about it, because there's like one character in particular, I don't remember the name, who does not have the sense of feeling, because of them becoming superpowered, they basically becoming a living being made of metal.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so because there's such things as quote unquote monstrous superheroes or super people in the series, and sometimes the powers warp them for reasons I won't get into because of spoilers. Um, I have to be careful about that because I have the tendency of accidentally spoiling, because spoilers mostly don't phase me. Sometimes I forget that you know most people aren't like me in that case. So yeah. But anyway, but there's another character I really like, and it makes me go back to that conversation about Toph and Matt Murdock, and the idea of having your abilities or your powers that work with your disability or balance out your disability. But there's this one character that I really enjoy in Worm, who unfortunately, and it's not a disability, but her minority status, her representation of what she it's a orientation, um, is a result of her superpowers affecting her and her state of being.
Gotcha.
Um, and not only is it how its representation in the fandom itself is not the greatest. It's not the worst. I have seen a lot worse, but you could definitely tell that the writer tried their best with a lot of the different types of rep that they try to put in their work. But at the same time, especially in fan fiction, the fan community, you see a lot of I am not touching that with a 5,000-foot pole.
Sure.
Um, and I think you see that with a lot. Like for example, going back with Matt Murdock, there is a lot of people, especially in the fan fiction community, um, who do not know how to write him fan character and know how to rep him correctly, or in a positive way. So you'll get a lot of takes where, and it doesn't have to be him. I've seen it with other fandoms of other disabled characters where there's a lot of terrible, and I can never say the word to save my life. The act of treating someone like an infant.
Oh,
Uh,
infantilization.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like, and that's terrible. And some people learn from it, some people don't. But it's I but I think that kind of, and that and specifically because I think every type of representation, like good rep for various sexual orientations versus rep of, like, in some ways there is similarities, but there's also going to be some major differences based on their own experiences. Like, I think, and this is one of the main thoughts that kind of came into my head when I watched the video you sent me today.
Yeah.
um that a large part of the reason why there's so much terrible representation, one, there's a lack of understanding, though it's getting better. There's still a lot of work to be done. There always will be a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's getting better, generally speaking. But and that's for a number of reasons. But I think a large part of the reason why there's still in some places a lot of terrible rep is because of the fact that, and I know this could go into a different conversation, so I won't go too deep into it. But the fact that we live in a capitalist society, and also the fact that with technology and healthcare as it is now compared to like 20 years ago, let alone 100 years ago, this idea of, well, why can't we fix it? Why can't we cure it? And not understanding that there's all kinds of layers into that conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this idea of being afraid, because especially in large capitalist societies, let alone large fandoms that take a lot of influence on capitalist society, there's this idea that your worth is measured only by your rate of production, or what you can give to your society. So there's this really shitty idea that, oh, well, you can't do anything, so you're just waste. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. If you would just try to learn, to educate yourself, and there are always ways around any obstacle if you take the time. And the old saying, if there's a will, there's a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some things that are just, I mean, you may not be able to do everything. Like, I understand that like when I started going through my teenage years, I started going through my blindness journey, I kept hearing people say, oh, well, you'll still be able to do anything that you want. Well,
Yeah. Honestly,
no.
no. It's a
And
nice sentiment, but like, no, unfortunately.
is there a lot of things I can do? Yeah, especially as time goes on and technology gets better and we come up with new, not just technology, but new techniques and new understanding. But everything in life has a limitation. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's and I know I'm kind of jumping to point, but like going back to that idea, oh, well, they're broken. You can't do anything. One of the things that drives me insane, and I've had this conversation like when I started with my site, let alone with rapid media. People are like, well, uh, if you could gain all your site back right now, would you? And for me personally, yeah, I lost my sight, but looking back on a large part of the person who I was before compared to who I am now, I would consider myself a much better person because I had that experience. Everyone's going to be different. Some people are going to have to go through that and have a terrible experience. But that aside, there are some really interesting aspects I don't think people think about. Because let's put it this way. Let's say you have a character, or even a real life person who's been completely blind from birth, and let's say they're 18 or 40, it doesn't matter. but they've lived long enough that they've gotten used to it. It's been part of their life their entire life.
Hmm.
And you suddenly give them a magical cure. You, as the person who gives them this so-called cure, you think, oh yeah, we fixed them, we helped them, we cured them, but you don't realize that you broke their life because now they have to relearn everything.
Yeah. I see, I have, at least as far as me personally goes, because like I don't think that, you know, someone's disability should just be like erased.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had the opportunity to get my sight back, I would probably jump at that chance. I'm gonna be completely honest, because um me losing it fucking broke my world, you know? It really had an awful impact on me. And sure, yeah, I adapted to it over time and stuff like that, but I'm not gonna lie, you know, if I lose what's left, I'm not gonna be able to do what I do here, at least not in the same way. And like, sure, you could argue I could adapt again, and I very likely will. Like, you know, I'm not gonna let it stop me, but I'm gonna be honest, if I had the opportunity to go the other way, I probably would, and that's just a personal thing for me. And I've had this conversation with people before, and I've said similar things, and I have gotten so many very negative reactions to that. And like, I get why, to be honest. I really do get it, but I'm also like, you know, I I've got a lot to unpack with my own disability. I am not as at peace with it as I would like to be, you know? And I think that that's an important thing to acknowledge, especially when representing it too, is just it's not um it's not like a sunshine and rainbow kind of thing. Like, I know deep down there is nothing to be ashamed of as a blind person, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with being blind, but, you know, I've got my own stuff to unpack and sort of come to terms with that, you know, it's not, it's frustrating living with it, you know? It can be, at the very least. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, it's all doom and gloom, because it ain't. But it's frustrating. And sometimes seeing that in how it's represented, like, I don't know. Sometimes seeing that struggle in characters that I like, it just, I don't know, it just makes me feel like seen. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, yeah, being seen, you know, the fact that we exist, and I think that your perspective is just as valid and just as important, just as powerful, because we all come at different things differently. And I feel kind of similar to one of the other things I have. I know medically, technically, it's not necessarily considered a disability per se. I kind of do because it really affects my life. I have slight brain damage to
Mm.
and a condition called. Thankfully, it's a minor version because some of the worst the greater versions is not fun at all. But I have a condition called aphasia, where the parts of the brain that govern communication, language, and to a certain extent memory, at least like it's not so much I forget things, but there will be moments where I want to say something, I want to write something, and it's there, and I know that it's there, but I literally cannot access it at that moment. So a lot of times you'll hear me go, the thing I want to talk about, it's right there, it's on the tip of my tongue, like, and I ramble, and that's because I know what I want to say, I just cannot access it at that moment. And
Gotcha.
as someone who is a writer, and as someone in some of my communities, I do stand up poetry reciting. Reciting famous poetry, like Robert Frost, Dylan Thomas, but also reciting poetry I've written myself. it sucks because there'll be times like, hold on, I gotta find my brain. Give me a moment. It's yeah, there we go. Um, so I would definitely would love to not have that and to live without it. But but and if I had a choice, yeah, I definitely like with you with your own personal blind experience. I would like to get rid of that. Um,
Yeah,
hell,
I can see why that would be frustrating at times. Cause like,
sorry, go ahead.
so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Um, but like, cause like sometimes I struggle with my words, and like I've been doing that for half of this video. Um, but I think for me that's just more of a like an anxiety sort of thing, where like it's like a little bit of internal panic rather than not being able to access information, I guess.
Well,
So different thing, very different thing. But
well,
like
anxiety definitely.
frustrating either way, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean anxiety, especially social anxiety, it also sucks. So when you add that on top of other things, it's like, eh. For me, it comes in the form of I could be totally confident what I want to say, have a great conversation. Like for example, I totally believe what I'm saying in this podcast episode. But I assure you, after we're done, there's going to be at least a moment where I'm thinking, "You're an asshole." Uh, what you said is asshole. I know it's not, but that is the monster of anxiety. You know.
Oh no, that is so friggin' real though. That is absolutely real. Um, I don't know. Okay, so sorry, I was trying to like I lost my train of thought completely. Um,
You're good.
yeah, no, sorry, cuz I'm like I was trying to think, right? Because I initially wanted to do this because I wanted to talk about like um uh, I wanted to talk about D&D.
Well, we can get that in a moment. I'm sorry that we kind of, but I mean, this is still a good conversation
Oh,
that we've
it's
had.
great. No, I'm totally down with it. I'm just like I haven't obviously I'm like making the effort, you know, to pay attention to what you're saying because it's important and relevant and all that. But I'm also like how do I segue this, you know?
Well, one, you tell your guest to shut up.
But I don't want to do that. I feel no. Um
Uh, I am the king of digression. I assure you.
so I'm sorry for like abruptly and awkwardly derailing this.
I
I am very out of practice when it comes to podcasts apparently. Um but like we've been talking this whole time about all kinds of rep. I also um I also don't want to end up like regurgitating everything that was in that video. I'm gonna, you
I
know,
feel that.
um like you know, we've said a lot of important shit today so far.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be entirely honest, my entire motivation for this was to talk about like how can we implement good representation into something like D&D or other, I guess, RPGs or even games or anything like that. I guess other games. Or just writing in general, like books, fanfics,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um and like I've been thinking about this all day, and like the simplest conclusion that I've come to is number one, know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Number two, like we've spent this whole time talking about like not only representation itself, but like our own experiences kind of thing. So it's like if you have a
Yep.
character that is, say, blind, for example, and you're trying to incorporate them into D&D. I know there's like a few videos out there that talk about saying specific classes and specific whatever. I'm gonna my personal take is a little bit different because I don't think it should be limited to specific classes and stuff like that. I honestly hate that idea. It frustrates me because it feels limiting and stuff like that. And I do understand that there are, there's limitations. Whether we like it or not, there's limitations. And I feel like knowing, knowing what those are for your character and stuff like that is important. But I think a lot of it can be, how your character interacts with people, how they talk to people, how people perceive them, what in the world do they actually, like, how do they, quote unquote, see the world, and I think a lot of that can come down to description. Easier said than done sometimes. I'm really bad for it.
No, you're good. No, I've been trying to think about this as well, and I think one of the first steps is, and this I actually when you mentioned that you want to talk about this and you want to do this video, it reminded me of a Reddit post I read a while back where someone who was a sibling of someone who was blind wanted to play a character in their game that was blind to try to feel closer. I mean, yeah, they talked to their sibling and they were able to get their sibling's experience, but just to kind of like to try to put themselves in their sibling's shoes, and unfortunately did not go well. And it did not go well because the dungeon master was not willing to walk that road with them. Like, and this isn't just a representation disability. This is anything you want to do in, especially in Dungeons and Dragons. Talk to your dungeon master and make sure that one, they're willing to allow a good rep.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're just gonna have terrible DMs. It's don't do that. Like
I have a horror
D&D
story, but go on.
It's well, I do too. Is better than and sometimes no D&D, as much as it sucks, is better than bad D&D, especially depending on how good it is. But make sure you talk to your dungeon master. Make sure that they're on the same page and they're willing to do with that. For example, in this particular case, they're like, oh well, you can't see, so obviously you're gonna have a disadvantage on doing just about anything.
Oh.
And there are ways of doing without doing that, and I don't remember how, because it's been a couple months since I've read this, but I just remember it being an absolute train wreck, and the character, the dude's character ended up dying within 5 minutes of the first battle, and it could have been avoided. But part of that, not all of it, but part of it was that the dungeon master decided that they were going to enforce the limitations to the point that they literally made it possible to succeed. And two, the players of the party the other players of that particular party were not willing to work with that player and their character. Because like Dungeons and Dragons is a teamwork game.
Yeah, it's collaborative, 100%.
Yeah.
So like, I was thinking a lot about like, what if I essentially played myself in D&D? Like, what would I want? How would I go about that? And how would I want things to go down? Because like, in my mind, first thing that came to my mind is that like, regardless of class, right? I'm not even like thinking about that at this point. I'm just like, okay, so how would I describe how I'm seeing things? Or like feeling them. Like, I'm just like, okay, so if my sight sucks, sure, some of the stuff is gonna be a little bit visual, but like, what else am I experiencing besides that? Like, what am I hearing? What am I smelling? Like, if I had my cane in that world, like, how does the ground feel? Like, how does, like, there's a lot of detail that could go into it, and like, maybe some situations doesn't call for all of that detail, but like, it's like I feel like it's a matter of what do I have access to? How would I adapt to that? Um, how are the people in that setting going to react to I guess me, um, or insert character here. Um, I don't know. And then like, I feel again collaborative. So like with the, when it comes to like the DM saying like, oh hey, make a perception check on this. Like maybe somebody that doesn't have sight would probably be in theory more reliant on like investigation, because like they'd
Yeah.
be physically checking stuff out instead of looking at stuff, or you know a combination of both, but it would still be more of like a thing where investigation would be better ish, maybe, question mark. I don't listen, I'm not a DM.
No, no, you're fine, and I know exactly what you mean. But well, and it also depends on the level of DM because there's a
Yeah.
difference between all right, make a perception check. What do you perceive versus okay? You may have a disadvantage in perception checks based on sight, but on the flip side, I, as a dungeon master, would be willing to give an advantage
When it
on
comes to like
perception checks.
sound or other
The
things.
smell or the smell. Like I remember one time, so I'm not a father, but I do have nephews and nieces, and none of my nephews and nieces are visually impaired. Though I remind my siblings that they should check because the thing's a genetic thing, and so it
Mm-hmm.
can pop up.
Yep.
And So I remember hanging out with one of my nephews who's turning 13, and he did not understand like my world, so to speak, like how I live, how I'm able to, and I can see some to some extent, but a large part of it is stopping. Yes, like for example, I take my dogs out so they can go use the bathroom. Yes, they run around, it's hard to catch them, but if I stop and I listen to their feet, to their barking, to the grass and the plants in the yard that rustles as they run by it, versus reaching out and feeling for things. Like there's so many ways of our senses. I think, and this affects role playing and storytelling as well, because we live in a sighted world, and I think it's like what 80% focus for an average human being is on sight, because there's so much that we perceive through sight.
Yeah.
Yes, we as a species, we have our other senses, but they're not primary. Um, they're not primary. And while I do use what sight I have remaining to perceive things, my touch, my sense of smell, my hearing, uh, fills in the rest of the gaps. It's like, okay, I know my dog is on the right hand side of the front yard. It sounds like he's going on the other side of the flower bed. Cool. Well, I'll go around the other side so I can meet him. And the same thing can be done in Dungeons and Dragons. It's or tools, like we tend to use a lot of canes, or uh, um, for some blind people who prefer guide dogs, like that can be implemented in Dungeons and Dragons specifically.
100%.
And that doesn't even have, and with the right feats, that doesn't even have to be class specific. Um, I mean, yes, there is one particular class that makes it a lot easier, but you could just easily take like a monk, for example, and give them, I forget the name of the feat off the top of my head. I think it's like Magical Initiate, where you get one cantrip of your choice and one first level spell of your choice from whatever spell list.
Sure.
And you find familiar. There you go. So long as you cast find familiar, you have what you can cast as a ritual. You have that familiar, and you can sense through their senses. So like, or you can, yeah, you can sense through their senses. So it's like, I mean, and there are limitations to that. Like the easiest one, what happens if someone kills your familiar? I mean, yeah, you can summon them back, but until you're able to summon them back,
That takes
you
time.
just, yeah, it takes time. You just lost your, your advantage. And
That's like having someone. That's like having, like, if you rely on a cane. That's like having someone come along and just breaking it. Like that
I've
is
never,
a. That is. I mean, it's obviously slightly different, but it's like, for somebody that relies on a cane, like a white cane to navigate and
yeah.
stuff, and somebody comes along and breaks it. Um, that is a big blow to your ability to navigate. Still possible,
Oh yeah, it's
but
still possible.
it's a hell of a lot more difficult, you know? Also, dick move. Um,
I've never had someone intentionally break my cane, but I have someone intentionally stole my cane before. So,
I've had canes break on me while I was trying to use them. I had a loaner cane back in the day from the blind school
mhm.
because I was waiting for a new cane, and the one that they gave me, the tip was like barely in there,
Ooh,
and while I was trying to use it, it legitimately snapped off.
ooh,
So I had no cane for at least a week, and thankfully it wasn't so bad because I was in a familiar environment, so I knew where to go. But
mhm.
if I was somewhere unfamiliar, that would have been frustrating.
I
You know,
and that right and right that right there, Minnie, I think is another aspect that could be improvised into D&D.
yeah.
So
What
familiarity of
happens
a
when your tools break?
well, that too, but I was actually thinking about familiarity of a place versus unfamiliarity of a place.
hmm
Like if someone's playing a blind character and they were from a particular village, for example, as long as that character's in that village, I would give them advantage for navigating, for perception checks, for investigation checks. Um, because they're familiar with it. Like I've lived in the town that I lived in. Out of my soon to be 37 years, I have lived in this town for 34 years, 33 and a half, 34, whatever. And because of that, even though there have been slight changes over the decades, um,
You've had
if
time to
I,
learn that.
yeah, like I could literally navigate this place at night in total darkness without my cane if I had to. I wouldn't want to. That would suck.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but
like you could in theory.
yeah, but I could. And I think that is, that's something that you could definitely do in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, okay, you can't see, and you know what? Not only is this interesting for a character that could be useful for a character who's permanently blind, but there are spells or diseases or whatever in the game that can cause you to go blind temporarily. But having that situation, okay, you just had blindness / deafness cast, you can't see. Are you in a place that you're familiar with? That's all you are? Cool. Well, then I will give you advantage on investigation and perception checks because you've been there. Um,
Yeah, it's like
you know,
because it's like if you're in your own house and that were to happen in your own house, I would hope you'd still be able to navigate around your own house, a place that you live and know and understand. Um, that's like, I guess, the most like
yeah,
extreme, obvious example of that. Like, because like I can navigate my apartment in complete darkness. Because I know it. I've lived here for over a year. I know where everything's at, you know. Um, Whereas if I were to go to my mom's, I don't know that place as well. So like, that's not reliably happening. I still could. I could figure it out. I have the skills to figure it out. I just would prefer not to, you know.
Well, I mean, I confess when I'm in an unfamiliar place, and this is partly due to social anxiety. This is partly due to wanting to take my time to to fill it out. But when I'm in a new place that I'm not familiar with, I'm kind of slow at putting my feelers out, so to speak,
Yep,
because it's
totally
like
get that.
well, for one thing, I'm a big dude, so like I don't want to end up being that bull in the china shop situation because I have been that before and it's not fun.
Oh, it's awful. I completely understand that.
um, but there are other situations. Like I think talking about another disability for a moment. I think one of the ways that we address deafness and or well, not even deafness, but muteness. And what I meant to say in the games we play, we have one particular character who is mute.
Hmm.
One of our games, and how we tackled that, allowing him to have that character to have a form of sign language and having the party pick it up pretty easily. There's been other games I played in, like in one of my favorite campaigns. I unfortunately had to bow out, due to a lot of shenanigans, especially family shenanigans a couple years ago. There's a character who was also mute, and the solution they took was basically magical chalkboard.
Okay, that's pretty cool though. Cause like
Um,
not everybody who's like mute or deaf knows sign, so like it makes sense to have multiple different like approaches to that.
well, and I also got to thinking, like not only like so one of the not every spell in D&D has a verbal component,
Right.
but but I got to thinking because I've been working on my own world for the past few years. Due to shenanigans, I've had to take hiatuses on it. But I got to thinking on magic. Like this past few weeks, I got to thinking about magic, how that works and like whatnot, and tying into a particular element. And it got me thinking about sound and the verbal component of magic. Um, One side effect of some people who are deaf is that they may not be able to speak,
Yeah.
depending on their circumstances and a whole bunch of other variables.
Oh yeah, it's a huge
So
spectrum.
oh yeah. So I got to thinking, both for people who are characters who are mute as well as deaf, how would they be able to cast spells if in my world the concept of magic is tied to an element that is connected to the concept of thunder and sound?
Yeah, see, I
And
would have just used like sign as a stand-in for it, just
well,
Naruto
well,
style.
that's part of it. But the other thing I thought about is, you know, because a lot of times you could still feel vibrations if nothing else.
Mhm.
So not only signing, like making the gestures, but like tapping your fingers, drumming your hands on whatever surface you have at your fingertips. It might even just be your own body. You may not necessarily be able to. Your character might not necessarily be able to perceive it outside like the most vaguest sense of vibration, but it would still be enough to satisfy the requirements of that component spell.
No, see, that
Uh,
makes perfect sense. And you just reminded me of back when I was in high school, I
mhm,
did a co-op placement with the music therapist,
mhm,
and uh, she did her classes mostly with the the deaf blind kids in the basement type thing.
mm,
And a lot of them were profoundly deaf, and like half the time when I was down there, um, you know, we would just rely on the vibrations from the bass and other instruments and stuff, and you know, they couldn't, a lot of them couldn't hear the music, but they could feel it, like literally feel it, and like I don't know, I gained a very deep appreciation for that kind of thing.
oh yeah.
um So that makes a lot of sense. It's just like, how else can you perceive that thing, even if it's, because like sound can very much be felt,
Well, and it
but
also,
like you can feel that shit sometimes.
and it also helps with surface,
Hmm.
like percussion especially helps. Like I remember when I did when I first got into show choir so many years ago, um, both the bad and the good. When I finally got into the good version of the class, where I wasn't basically just sat in a corner and told to twiddle my thumbs.
Mm.
Um, I'm so oversimplifying that, but we got to watch this movie called Stomp, and it was all about percussion. And like going in it, the people are like, because like when I was in middle school,
I know the
I
one. Sorry, go on, but I know the one. I know what you're talking
well,
about.
and I did marching band for a semester, and unfortunately, I made the choice to leave due to a number of shenanigans, including the teacher and also just losing the oversaturation of percussion. But I loved that movie when I saw it in my second attempt at show choir because it wasn't just percussion, but it was percussion using anything and everything. My personal favorite part were the dudes. I figured if they were in like a water treatment plant or they were in some place where there was like a lot of water and they had those oil drums and they had socks full of tennis balls. And they were making some of the best music just with that. And because sound travels faster. I forget if it was faster, further, or both in water than it does in air. So there's all kinds of interesting things that you can do with that.
That is wild to think about, actually.
Also, I remember there being a segment where the dude just went wild in an elevator. Like he was in like not like the Empire State Building, but like one of those huge like skyscrapers. And he got on the elevator from the top, and he's just waiting his turn to go down to the bottom, and you can just see him through the window, and he is just going nuts inside, like just tapping, pounding, slamming himself into different sides, just making all kinds of noise.
Yeah, no, I definitely. I'm pretty sure I saw that, like, back in the day when I did like music appreciation and stuff like that. God damn, that takes me back. Um,
You're welcome.
sorry, we're getting sidetracked again. I mean,
Blame
not
me at
entirely,
some
but
point.
like you can take a lot of these ideas and incorporate them into your game or your writing or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I guess it's just a matter of, I say just a matter of, but it's not all the time, of like taking into account, different perspectives, and I guess just talking to the people in the community that you're trying to represent and
Well, I mean,
trying to.
and you can do it. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say you could do because, like, so, like, because like going back to a previous conversation, but or previous topic, you know, amputees, or not even just amputees, but someone. It doesn't even have to be amputees. It could just be someone who's paralyzed.
Yeah.
Um, like you could come like for example, going touching on the video, like they brought up one of the I forget his name, but the guy on the video came with the fact that in China, and before in BC, I think it was like what was it, 4,000 BC. I don't remember what, but they had their own. They had designs for their own kind of a wheelchair. There's so many ways that can be implemented in the game.
Hmm.
I am a huge fan of A Song of Fire and Ice / Game of Thrones, except for that last season on the TV show.
I never
Um,
did watch that,
we don't
unfortunately.
we don't talk about that last season in this household.
So I've
Anyway,
heard.
um, but there's a character who almost dies because he sees something that he's not supposed to, and essentially he gets disabled. He no longer has the ability to use his legs.
Gotcha.
And one of his brothers befriends a character who is a dwarf not in the fantasy sense of species, but um, in the human sense of being. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, and I apologize if I accidentally offend anybody. Um, but someone shorter, um, much smaller in stature, and that character, who's incredibly intelligent, comes up with a design that he gifts his friend's brother, and it's a design that he uses because he's a lot smaller. He still wants to be able to ride a horse, and so he designs a saddle that him or someone who cannot use their legs can use. And like the same thing can be applied. Like, for example, I mean, rules of the game aside, for example, if you're playing a halfling or a dwarf or any species that's small size, you could get your hands on and on a mount. Like you could get yourself a mastiff dog and get a saddle, and you can ride that, for example, all over the place. Or working with your DM, you can have a wheelchair made, or an approximation of a wheelchair that can help you. Actually, the Charlie from the video, when they were mentioning the story that they're writing about the wheelchair pirate crew member, and the fact that one of their crewmates would be like giving them piggyback ride, it reminded me of some of the old classic editions of D&D I used to play, where a team would use some crazy class and prestige class combinations where they would have a smaller player character basically riding on the shoulders of a larger player character, and both unleashing unholy hell upon their enemies together.
That sounds like a fun, chaotic time. I feel like I need to actually watch that video again, because like there was so much in there. Hilariously enough, we've been talking for far longer than that video. Yeah. That's the funny thing, is like these are meant to be kind of short, but you know what? I feel like the longer length is justified in this case.
Well, I mean, blame me. I'll take that responsibility, because like I used to be part of a couple collab channels back in the day.
Uh-huh.
And especially the last one I was part of, my boss hated me because she'd be like, "All right, everybody, make a 10-minute video," and they would give us a topic that a normal person could come up with like a 2 to 4 minute video. I think the shortest video I ever gave her back on any topic was like 15 to 20 minutes, because that is not how my brain works. This is the reason why I don't do much on TikTok, because I mean, yeah, now if you do it a certain way, you can do up to 10-minute videos, but that's still way too short for me. I am a wordy person by nature.
Yeah, I gave up on TikToks, but like I just, you and me in general, every time we get talking, we always talk forever, which is fine. I have no complaints, because like, again, sometimes the longer length makes perfect sense. There was definitely a lot to talk about, and I feel like there's still more we could talk about, but it's already been an hour and a half, and I think we might want to call it here, but we can certainly do a part 2.
I mean, I'm willing to come back for a part 2.
Hell yeah. But you know what, y'all? I'm apparently today is just me being awkward day. That's okay. You know what? Thank you, everybody, if you've stuck around this long. I appreciate you. Thank you, Rob, for visiting the tavern today. It's been fantastic.
I'm always happy to come on here and have a good chat. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? If any of you are still watching this video, let us know your thoughts in the comments. I would certainly love to continue this conversation with the rest of you, because I feel like there's a whole lot to say. There's so much more we haven't touched on, like, for example, how healing magic affects disability.
There are so
Yikes!
many ways to touch
Yikes!
that.
Potentially. Um, but yeah, you know what, y'all? That is gonna be it from us, and I don't know how to do an outro. Apparently, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.